Daggett is located in San Bernardino County, California, 10 miles east of Barstow at an elevation of around 2,000 feet. It's dry and hot during the day, and in the winter, nights are cold with days mild. In the late 1700s, the Van Nume or Desert Serrano were the first to meet the traveling Catholic missionaries, but Paiute and other Shoshonean-speaking bands were also present. The old Spanish Trail was forged in 1829 as a trade route between Santa Fe and the coastal missions of Southern California. By 1841, it became a route for settlers, and after 1846, Mormons traveled to and from Salt Lake City so extensively that the section between San Bernardino and southern Utah was called the Mormon Trail. By 1848, thousands joined the westward march when gold was discovered. Few stayed in the harsh desert, but the discovery of local mineral deposits led to the area's development and the expansion of the transportation system. In 1873, a silver strike occurred at Panamint City, north of Daggett. At their peak, the Panamint City mines produced so much bullion that freighters couldn't keep up with the stamp mill. While lone prospectors searched the hills and gullies on foot and horseback, large-scale mining required better roads to transport heavy equipment to extract and process the ore. Major mining interests sought freight companies to connect their operations with San Francisco, San Bernardino, and LA supply centers. Soon, cities west of the Sierra Nevada competed to become these supply hubs. Merchants lobbied for the construction of railroads into the ore-rich desert mountains, and newspaper editors highlighted the importance of these roads and reported on the progress of their own towns, warning they could lose the race. Farmers in Inyo County also pushed for new roads to transport their surplus hay, grain, and vegetables to the mining communities. Adventurous individuals soon introduced desert stage lines along the fastest supply routes. With goods and people now flowing into the mining camps, these communities quickly transformed into boom towns. The towns required all the supplies and services typically found in others. The roads established to transport heavy mining equipment and ore could be shipped by stage and wagon. With each new mining discovery, new roads branched off the old ones. However, the boom was short-lived, and by 1880, these towns were mere shadows of their former selves. Daggett was fortunate to rely on transportation and supply to the mines rather than mining itself. As prospecting continued, the small crossroads along the Mojave River awaited the next new discovery. It wouldn't have to wait long. Daggett lies in the shadow of the Calico Mountains, the site of another massive silver strike in 1881. The Calico mining district was quickly formed, and overnight, Calico sprang up at the site of the most significant silver discovery in California. The bustling town carved out a canyon in the barren hills, had more than 500 active mines, including the giant Silver King mine, which would produce more than 20 million over 12 years. Within 2 years of its founding, 1,200 people lived in Calico, relying on supplies outside the town. The Southern Pacific Railroad looked to extend a line east from Mojave to Calico Junction and to Needles in the Colorado River. The new station was renamed Daggett to avoid confusion with the town of Calico in the nearby mountains. It also honored John Daggett, then Lieutenant Governor of California, and an early owner of one of these mines. The tracks along the banks of the Mojave River supported the town's development, and the railroad supplied a well for the Daggett homesteaders. With growth, a water main along each street piped water to barrels at every house. The Southern Pacific's water tank soon became vital for the new station. In 1884, Southern Pacific began leasing their line to the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad, an offshoot of the Santa Fe Railroad. The new company built a beautiful 2-story depot with a freight house in Daggett, which stood for the next 79 years. This new building gave residents hope for a bright and prosperous future. Seymour Alf opened a butcher shop for the miners. George Toney and George Meyer started a merchandise store, and Alexander Falconer opened a saloon facing the important railroad tracks. The following year, Daggett was flourishing, and the town organized a school, and residents were seen adding to their homes. Trees were planted, and businesses expanded. Alf added a blacksmith shop to his interests, seen today on First Street. His shop created borax wagons, which were made known by the Death Valley 20-mule team freighters. 2 daily stages traveled between Daggett and Calico, with 100,000 in bullion passing through each month. The Stone Hotel on Santa Fe Street was finished in 1882 by Victor Van Briesen. He built the Capitol Saloon next door with George Mackenzie a few years later. The hotel's first floor stone walls were 2 feet thick, keeping it cool in the summer. A balcony off the wood-framed second floor provided a view of Daggett's main street. The 2-story building featured a large glass dome above the open lobby, an impressive and welcoming sign for desert-weary travelers. Many famous visitors stayed at the hotel, including John Muir, Frances Marion Borax Smith, and Walter Death Valley Scotty. Scotty was so often that he kept a standing reservation in room 7, just off the lobby with a small private entrance. The Stone Hotel would go on to survive 3 fires, including one in the early 20th century that resulted in its present 1-story height. In early 1885, partners Quinn and Sutcliffe built a 2-story addition to their brewery after a strong response to their beer. They raised enough funds to add porch awnings downstairs for summer shade, setting it a touch above the other 20 saloons in town. Miners would pour in from Calico to celebrate holidays such as Christmas. The Railroad Hotel hosted a lavish ball and dance, serving giant fruit cakes and pastries in the morning. On the 4th of July, residents held a picnic along the river, and about 9 miles from Daggett, with a dancing pavilion at Hawley's Station, organized by the Women's Literary Society. They provided refreshments and entertained the crowd with poetry readings, the Declaration of Independence, and music, dancing, and games. If a saloon had a restaurant, it was more often visited, while the rough acts were near the standalone bars and brothels. But a good dunk in the horse trough would make anyone sober up. It is said that hordes of people would congregate, and once a man was fatally stabbed, only to be held upright all night by the unknown miners around him. Silver wasn't the only mineral in demand in the Calico mining district. As early as 1882, rich colemanite deposits or calcium borate were discovered. At the time, it took wagons 3 days and 2 nights to haul a whole load of borate ore 12 miles from Calico to Daggett. New trails were established between the borax mines in Death Valley and the railroad terminal at Daggett. This was the era of the 20-mule teams, later glamorized by borax companies in their marketing. 2 famous freighters were Remy Nadeau and Ed Stiles. They operated the 20-mule teams between Death Valley and Daggett. It was common for Ed Stiles to take up to 11 days to cover 164 miles. Trouble always had to be looked out for, too, when a teamster lynched William Pitt, a 20-mule team driver, in 1884, sparking a vendetta. Behind the blacksmith shop, they found the teamster moaning with his skull crushed and a large, bloodied spoke from a wagon beside him. They arrested the drunk friend of Pitt on a tip from another teamster. The 2 were taken that night by a lynch mob with nooses thrown around their neck and slowly lifted off the ground. In a minute, they were cut free and only warned, with the teamster being forced out of town. Another incident involved Ed Silver, an African-American miner who was in and out of work. Some respected him for his service with the 10th Cavalry, known as the Buffalo Soldiers, but others were a product of their time and racially unjust. Eventually, Ed took a job with the American Borax Company and, like many miners, spent their earnings on liquor. The American Borax Company constructed a large processing mill in Daggett. Borax was used as a preservative in a medicine and as a flux in glazing enameling. The year was 1907, and Ed, who had been drinking, was arguing with his supervisor, Newt Miller, over wages. Newt answered by clubbing Ed with a wrench while Ed swatted a shovel back at him. Newt said, "I'll fix you," and headed to the office where he was known to keep a gun. In response, Ed took off and picked up his pistol at home. But Newt instead telephoned Deputy William Smithson, who enlisted the help of his friend Johnny Shorty Williams. They found Ed in the street, screaming out to those who wronged him. The story goes on to William approaching Ed and saying in a friendly tone, "What's the matter, Ed?" But in his drunken state, Ed fired 3 shots, ripping through the deputy's torso. He would die without a hospital in sight. Shorty hit the fleeing Ed, who made his way to Barstow before catching a train to San Bernardino. Sheriff J.C. Ralphs was put on the case, and with a posse of 12 men, Ed was found hiding in Cajon Pass. He escaped vigilante justice but died in San Quentin. It is worth noting that Ralphs also led a chase to capture Willie Boy. Community events started to overtake the rowdiness in town as locals organized horse racing, baseball games, and town dances. People hiked and picnicked in the mountains together and visited and posed for photographs by the spring waterfalls. A year later, Seymour Alf led efforts for the San Pedro, Los Angeles Salt Lake Railroad to build a line from Las Vegas to Los Angeles and East San Pedro. A stop in Daggett meant more laborers would stay and frequent the saloons. But when the railroad built its roundhouse and maintenance yards in Barstow instead of Daggett, businesses left with it. The borax works at Daggett's were vacant, and the town suffered more. The following year was ravaged by a wildfire that burned down much of the business district. However, with the advent of movies, Daggett was again a prime location for westerns and film stars like Wallace Beery, who purchased borax wagons for use in his films. Several of his films had both the Alf's home and blacksmith shop in their scenes. Traffic began to appear on the roads in the 1910s, and visitors driving from Los Angeles would stop on their way to Death Valley or to sightsee in the desert. These travelers brought a small revival in wayside businesses that continues today. Homesteaders, ranchers, and small-scale miners continue to call Daggett their home, as a museum and the remaining sites still tell a rich story. This has been Biographies of the West. My name is Lorin Morgan-Richards. Thanks for watching.